Jimmy Kempski from PhillyVoice.com. Lot there, Jimmy. You know, the last couple of days, they signed this deal. He speaks today. First off, let me get your opinion on the 2-year, $36 million deal. It seems like, I don't want to say there's a big divide, but there are certainly varying opinions on who won the deal.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I'm not really sure where I stand on who won the deal. But when you look at it from the Eagles' perspective, you know, they get him for 2 years. They get him just take a step back. In 2016, there wasn't going to be a quarterback better than Sam Bradford for the Eagles. So they weren't going to find somebody better in free agency. They weren't going to be able to trade for somebody better than Sam Bradford. They were going to draft somebody that could step in and immediately be better than Sam Bradford, more than likely. So by signing him, they at least can stay competitive in 2016 in what is a god-awful NFC East. So I can understand the appeal there, although I still don't think they're anything close to Super Bowl contenders, which really, in my opinion, should be the ultimate goal. Now, they get them for 2 years, so that allows them to, you know, they're not locked in long-term. So it's basically 2 years. It can be 1 year. They can get out of it with a little bit of pain if they want to cut them or trade them or do whatever they're going to do with them after the 2016 season. That buys them time to potentially draft a quarterback, develop and groom him, while Bradford's playing and keeping them reasonably competitive in 2016. So I get what they did there. So they can remain competitive in 2016 while also not committing long term. However, they paid a really high rent price to be able to do that.
Right. And now I agree with you that I think the Eagles won the years. I think Bradford won the money. I think the Eagles were willing to concede just to take the less years. But they did lower the cap hit by giving him, by not franchising him. So it was kind of like they all worked this out pretty well. As Bradford said today, we got something we were all agreeable on. But I think the Eagles were happy that Bradford was agreeable to this, even if they had to pay, as you mentioned, a high rent.
Well, on a cap point, yeah. I mean, while the cap number in 2016 isn't awful, I mean, it's $12.5 million, so it's actually about $500,000 less than what he was on the cap for in 2015. However, that number in 2017 jumps to $23.5 million. So if Bradford, for example, has a really good 2016 season, then, and the Eagles are looking to maybe extend him, he's going to have all the leverage in the world because he's going to be on that cap for $23.5 million. So they won't want him on the cap for $23.5 million, and he's not going to settle for anything less than a huge mega contract. Now, if he has a bad year and you cut him, there's still $22 million guaranteed. So now you just paid him basically $22 million for one season. And then if he's average again, then we're right back again where we were this offseason, where you're going to have debate from anyone with a heartbeat and opinion on whether they should keep him or not.
Jimmy Kempski with us. Jimmy, I thought one of the quotes that Sam had today, he said, "I think my mind is a great attribute to my game." What did you think when you heard him say that, and is he a quote-unquote smart quarterback?
Yeah, actually, the takeaway that I had from that quote was, I mean, what he was talking about when he answered that question was in regard to him being able to audible and making checks at the line, where he wasn't allowed to do that for the better part of the 2015 season under Chip Kelly, where Chip Kelly was just get up to the line as fast as you can, and it doesn't matter what defense they're in, just run it, and just run the play. And he didn't like that. Clearly, he likes to get up to the line of scrimmage, survey the defense, and if he needs to get out of a play, then he can get out of it. In fact, he used the term, you don't want to waste a play. Mm-hmm. So, I guess he figured a lot of times during the 2015 season, they were just wasting plays because they were running whatever was called, no matter what the defense was in. So, yeah, I mean, that was certainly a quote that kind of opened up my eyes a little bit there.
Jimmy's with us, Jimmy Kempski, PhillyVoice.com. Another thing, now I kind of play off what Pete just asked, which is, so does that kind of indicate to you that if Chip Kelly's the coach here and he was asked this a little bit, but he kind of gave a kind of no. Do you think if Chip Kelly's the coach here, Bradford wanted to come back? Because he kept saying over and over again, I thought that was the theme today, Jimmy. I wanted to get this done. I wanted my agent to be back here. I love Philadelphia. I mean, he was trying to make that pretty clear. But if Chip Kelly's the coach here, does he have the same tune?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were reports that were out there that he wasn't happy in Philadelphia. So, I mean, whether he was or not, he was going to say that over and over again, to kind of debunk that, whether it was true or not. In terms of whether he wanted to, whether he wanted to stay here, if Chip were still here, he was asked, if there was ever any consideration to following Chip to San Francisco, and he basically just went, and as far as, him wanting to stay here, way back in December, I think it was after the loss to the Redskins, and then again, I think it was also after Chip Kelly had gotten fired. He said that he wanted to be in the system for 2 consecutive years, because over the course of his career, he's dealt with a lot of different head coaches and offensive coordinators. In fact, in 2016, Doug Peterson and Frank Reich will be the 4th head coach and offensive coordinator, respectively, in his 7-year career. So he wanted to kind of be able to grow in the same system, and the only way that he would have really been able to do that would be if he would have followed Chip Kelly to San Francisco. And again, he said that was not a consideration. Now, whether that was not a consideration or the Niners didn't have any interest in him, who knows? But nothing worked out there. He did mention that a lot of the things that Doug Peterson does with his offense is similar to what they were running in that final, or I think Peterson actually said this, was similar to what they were running in that final game against Giants, where he saw a little bit more of a traditional offense than would have been running for the entirety of the year when Pat Shurmur took over for the fired Chip Kelly. So he said that kind of appealed to him because Peterson's offense was similar to what Shurmur ran, and not just in that game, but in his rookie year when Shurmur was his offense coordinator with the Rams in 2010.
Hey, Jimmy, one of the quotes today, they tried to get something out of Sam Bradford about Marco Murray, and he said, we don't usually talk about football. Yeah. That's a pretty good deflection there, right, in a way, not to answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, like, whenever I hang out with my coworkers, work is always going to come up. So, I don't buy for a second that he and Murray don't talk about work, when they hang out.
We had Ron Jaworski on the show last week. We were fortunate that he walked right in and put a headset on and did what Jaws does. And he said that he thinks DeMarco Murray's on the decline and that he's on a downward spiral and that it's only going to get worse.
He actually, the term he used was out of gas.
Out of gas. What do you think of DeMarco Murray right now?
Well, I thought they used him horribly last year. I don't think they really played to his skill set at all. However, at the same time, he looked slow. I mean, he looked really slow at times, especially on those runs around the edge. He just looked like a running back that had nowhere near the speed that he had the previous year, and it's understandable. I mean, the number of carries, and he had 497 touches the previous year with the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys just ran him into the ground, and that there's a long history of running backs who had a really high carry total who were kind of ruined throughout the rest of their career thereafter. So, that should have been a warning sign. And a lot of people pointed that out when they made that signing. It wasn't as if we're looking at it now and go, "Oh, we should have known." A lot of people kind of picked up on that, but Chip Kelly did not.
Well, and Jaws also said that the average NFL career is 3.5 years. I've heard them use that line before, that when he joined the league in '73, the average NFL career was 3.5 years, and now 2016, the average NFL career still 3.5 years.
Well, and Murray's name seems like he's every 3 weeks. It's like either people are bored or out of stuff to discuss, and it's like, well, he's not happy. He's not happy. Dallas is interested in him, but the realistic possibility of him leaving is very slim. Correct?
Basically, slim to none. I mean, nobody's trading for that contract. That contract is bad, and nobody's going to trade for that contract. And the Eagles aren't going to cut him either, because if they cut him, it's a $13 million hit on the cap. If they keep him, it's $8, and if they trade him, it's 4. So the Eagles would love to trade him. They give him up for anything. Like forget even. I've heard people say like, oh, we should get like a second or third round pick. You're not getting anything. Like if you can get rid of him and you can get if you can get I don't know. If you can get a bag of footballs for him, then they do that in a heartbeat. Like they would be more than happy to trade him and only have that $4 million hit. But the problem is, again, like I said, no team is trading for that contract.
Jimmy Kempski, PhillyVoice.com. Sam Bradford did speak today, and I want to go back to Sam a little bit because there were some other things that he said that I thought stood out. You mentioned the fact that Peterson, he mentioned Shermer, being in the offense. You talked about the fact that he's always had a different guy. So I guess that's the first time. You really felt like maybe he feels like he's going to be comfortable in this offense. And the fact that he mentioned stability brings success, I think he's looking at this like it kind of gave me the indication that he liked Ertz and Matthews and that he thought that he had something here that maybe he just didn't have the right coaching before.
Maybe. Yeah, it could be. And he did mention that Ertz and Matthews, he was trying to work with them to bring him out to Oklahoma to work out with him. So that's something that Donovan McNabb used to do every year. I believe it was out in Arizona with his receivers. So that's certainly a good thing to see if you're a fan. Like you're looking at him kind of building that rapport with his receivers, which is something he wasn't really able to do last offseason because he was still recovering from that ACL. I mean, he did go through mini camps and OTAs. Didn't do everything in minicamp and OTAs. It was a full go in training camp. But, yeah, I mean, there's some logic in saying that it does take a little bit of time to build rapport with your receivers, and especially that receiving, group, because you have guys like Jordan Matthews and Nelson Aguilar and Josh Huff who, are all like 22, 23, 24 years old. So, the more he can work with those guys, then the better off they'll be. And I think those receivers will be better in 2016 as well. It would really be hard to be worse than they were with all the drops. But, yeah, I think you'll see some improvement there as well.
So, Jimmy, does this signing mean the Eagles are relevant? I mean, does this make them a relevant team? And in the NFL, 8-8 is relevant. I mean, you're in the playoff mix. So does Sam Bradford being back for the next 2 years make the Eagles a relevant team or a rebuilding team?
Yeah, I mean, last year, for as awful as they were, and I thought they were fortunate to win 7 games, but for as bad as they were relevant up until Week 16. Because that they weren't eliminated until they lost to the Redskins. So they really only played that one completely meaningless game in Week 17 last year. So yeah, I mean, as long as you're able to stay alive, and especially like I said earlier, in an NFC East division that is really just terrible. I mean, there's no good team in that division. So they'll be able to compete for the division. But again, like I said earlier, I don't see them as anything close to a Super Bowl contender.
No, and the way that I kind of described it yesterday, Jimmy, was look. They have him for 2 years. They can draft a guy maybe in the 3rd round this year or trade back up to get into the 2nd round. Then they can do what it seemed like Doug Peterson or Andy Reid would want to do, just have a guy kind of sit until he was ready. Sam plays 2 years, and then when he hands it over to this guy, they're not a 4-10 team. Maybe they're 8-8, maybe they're 9-7, but they're relevant. They're somewhere in the middle, and hopefully that guy is ready to take to the next spot. So you're right, maybe not Super Bowl aspirations, but they just want to kind of not be a disaster like they were last year.
And their defense has talent. I mean, you look at Fletcher Cox and Vinny Curry and Brandon Graham and Connor Barwin and, I could just name defensive players. I mean, they've good safety in Jenkins, and their linebacking core looks like it could have something with Jordan Hicks there in the middle, and like Kendricks maybe can wake up and realize the potential that he has. And so, things can go really right on the defensive side of the ball. And, on your point with the quarterback, there's no question in my mind that they're drafting a quarterback in this draft, maybe 2, whether that be in round. And I wouldn't completely rule out them drafting a quarterback at 13th overall. So they can go 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round, on down the line. I mean, it's not a quarterback class where you have that obvious number 1 or number 2 overall pick like you did a year ago with James Winston and Marcus Mariota. But there will be a bunch of guys that are taking the 1st round, and there will be more quarterbacks overall drafted than there has been in a long time. So it's a really deep class, and I think it's a good class. I don't think it's often thought of as a good class. But, yeah, I'm almost positive that they'll be drafting a quarterback at some point, and probably one that might be pretty high.
So what's next for this team? Bradford's checked. Everything else is checked. It seems like they've basically gotten everybody re-signed. They got a couple of their own free agents. So what do you envision being the next thing that you need to report on?
Offensive line. I think that will be the focus of free agency. I think they're going to sign at least one offensive lineman, possibly two. The guy that I kind of have earmarked would be Jeff Allen of the Chiefs, who, of course, formerly worked with Doug Peterson. And, we'll have all the familiarity with Doug Peterson, and really just kind of makes all the sense in the world in terms of, the familiarity and the kind of player that he is, and the Eagles' glaring need for help at both guard positions and really just overall in terms of their O-line depth and their future, along that O-line. So, yeah, I mean, they could add one or two because eventually they're also going to have to replace, Jason Peters, whose career is winding down. I think they'll go heavy in the draft with the offensive line as well. But that'll be the focus of free agency. Wouldn't be surprised if they took a safety. I'm pretty sure that Walter Thurman's going to be gone. So, yeah, I mean, there's a number of positions that they could attack in free agency. You're no longer going to get a compensatory pick for losing Sam Bradford because you just re-signed him, so that's not a consideration anymore. So I do think they're going to be semi-aggressive in free agency. Certainly not anything close to what they did last year when they went nuts with Chip Kelly. But I think they'll make a few signings here and there, maybe bring in 2, 3, 4 guys, some help on the defense maybe, but certainly the offensive line is going to be the primary focus of attention for free agency for the Eagles.
March 9th, it all begins. Jimmy Kempski, PhillyVoice.com. He's got plenty more coverage of the Eagles. Doug Peterson spoke today. Roseman spoke today as well. They will not be back at Lehigh for all of those people who like to make the pilgrimage. And obviously, March the 9th is the next big day that we'll be checking in. All right, Jimmy, back to work, pal.
Appreciate it, guys.